CultivatED Marketer, episode 24, Dr. Dani LaGree, resources for new professionals on how to shape their career. Hear from public relations professor at Kansas State University and co-founder of the Trajectory Project, Dr. Dani LaGree, as she shares the most important thing that a new professional can do to shape their career. Welcome to CultivatED Marketer, where we talk marketing professional development so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen.
And I'm Matt Tidwell.
Matt, how are we doing today?
I am great, Brent. I'm great. Here we are, middle of the winter now, and it's cold outside, but it's also an exciting time, right? We got some sports teams here in our local area that have done quite well, including a certain football team that uses a Native American symbol on the side of their helmet, who's apparently going to be playing football in February. So that's fun.
That is fun. And I am, in fact, continuing to celebrate as I'm wearing red today, you see. not everyone sees. My wife is still burning off the second half on the elliptical machine. She spent the entire second half with all that pent-up nervous energy on the elliptical machine during the game. So
that's funny. That's funny.
Well, it's funny I mentioned my wife. So my wife's a K-Stater, and we had the opportunity to speak to pretty tremendous Kansas State individual here in the last couple weeks, and she's the focus of our show. Dani LaGree, who's a public relations professor at Kansas State University and co-founder of the Trajectory Project. Had the pleasure of speaking with her, and again, a lot to share with us in this last episode around networking and young professionals and how they can shape their career.
Yeah, I've known Dr. Dani LaGree for a while and just have been so impressed with her as a researcher. And, she's sort of like myself and a couple of other people I know in academia, and that she spent some time as a working professional. And I know we covered that with her before she made the complete left turn and went into academia. But you can just tell in her voice as she talks, man, just a true labor of love for her, because her interest area is, we talk about having a guest that's just perfect for this show. Her interest area and her research area is literally the career progression for young professionals. That's what she focuses on in her research and in all aspects of same, right? So, what you should be, how you should be behaving as a young professional, how you should be thinking about your career progression, networking, just everything. And we cover basically all of that territory with her in this episode. So excited to get a chance for folks to hear from her.
Yeah, our discussion with her was unlike just about any discussion we've had with any other guest on the show, because we outline, and it's going to be a little longer, folks, because of that. Not too much longer, but a little longer than a traditional episode, because we walk through the framework and some of the tips that she shares with the Trajectory Project. Then we ask her about her career, and almost like a case study, she lines out through the course of the conversation. She lines out how her own career ended up being a model to some degree for the work she's done with the Trajectory Project. So that was super cool to hear that. It's like, you've got this insight that came from this experience, and people can kind of live it real time through her experiences.
Yeah, she knows from when she speaks, no question about it. And again, she's just real committed to this aspect of helping, young professionals, arming them with what they need to be successful in their career. And so we cover some things we've talked about, in other episodes, particularly around networking and things like that. But we also get into some very interesting areas, including things like, the gender divisions in marketing communications, and how we tend to see, definitely a good representation of females in marketing communications. Obviously, I know that through my classes, but yet still have some work to do from a representation perspective in some of the upper levels, management levels of marketing comms. And she studied that as well. So we have a really fascinating discussion around that also. So yeah, just I'm glad we're making this one a little bit longer, because we got a lot of territory to cover, and she does a great job.
Yeah, tremendous to hear her approach and thoughts around the glass ceiling and the gender roles, particularly within the profession. One of the things she also focuses on pretty significantly and mentions, and should be no great surprise to anyone that's listened to the show, is she talks about the significance and importance of one's professional network. And we outline that, which is a good segue probably to some professional development opportunities that are forthcoming in the area. If folks are within the Kansas City area, I know you and I'll be out and about if folks want to say hi to us at the end of February at the Kansas City IABC Business Communicators Summit, or affectionately known as BCS. And if folks saw the email that came out from IABC earlier this week, Alana Mueller's one of the guests and speakers at the lunch hour, and she's providing tips right there about how to best network. So, it's living the experience there.
Yeah, so excited for Business Communicator Summit it's going to be February 23rd. That's a Thursday at KU Edwards campus. For those of you in the Kansas City metropolitan area, I know we have listeners all around, but for those of you in Kansas City, and I love their theme this year, Brent. It's reconnect. Reconnect? I think reconnect. Yes. And boy, how appropriate because I think we actually launched this show 3 years ago at BCS. Yes. When it was in person, and they've had to, just because of the timing, everybody wasn't quite back in person yet. So their last the two in between have been virtual. So, it's going to be an opportunity to get all of the marketing communicators in this area back together. And it's just a great event. There'll be, you mentioned Alana, the keynoter will be Mark Schumann. We talked about him, I think, a little bit in our last episode. Really looking forward to not only hearing from him, but also probably dragging him into a room so you and I can talk to him a little bit for CultivatED Marketer. And then we're going to end the day with a panel that I've actually been asked to moderate, which I'm really excited about, because the whole theme of that panel is going to be what's coming in Kansas City. It's very Kansas City specific over the next 3 or 4 years, because we have NFL draft. We have obviously the World Cup coming up in a few years. And then in the middle of all that, there's going to be a brand new soccer stadium built for our women's professional soccer stadium, the Kansas City Current.
New airports opening up in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Right. So we've got some really former Kansas City Mayor Sly James will be on that panel. Chamber President Joe Reardon, a guy you and I both know, Jake Jacobson, who's done a lot of agency work here helping KC Current with their stadium. And then one of the folks at the Kansas City Sports Commission that's helped bring in the World Cup. So yeah, very, very excited. And also I should mention Mike Goff, who's a KU alum and also actually has quite a history. He actually was on the team or on the recruitment group for Kansas City when we went for the World Cup back in the 1990s. So it'll be very interesting to hear him. And one of the things will be, how can we as communicators locally, kind of take advantage of this great moment in time for our own organizations? And so, because man, I don't know, that you talk about a bunch of stuff lining up at once. It's going to be a really cool time. So that panel should be interesting. But of course, as you know, breakout sessions that are always good, and would encourage anybody to just search for KCIABC Business Communicator Summit to get the full lowdown.
That's great. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I read a Business Insider article about the time we landed the World Cup around how for every other city in North America, it was going to be a month-long party when 2026 arrived. But for Kansas City, it was going to be a tipping point. Much like the Olympics were in Atlanta back in the 1990s. It was a transformation. It was a transformational moment for that, for that city. The article equated that. Kansas City was called out specifically in that article. So it'd be interesting to see the observations and perceptions of the folks on that panel. And speaking of that, this episode will be out early part of February. So you mentioned a couple IMC program folks like Jake Jacobson and, folks that have helped with that. Phil Bressler, another individual's speaking for free event for KCIABC. I believe it's on Valentine's Day, February
14th.
The Pilgrim Coffee about branding. So if folks are inclined for a cup of coffee and want to hear Phil, they can do that. And then I know Social Media Club of Kansas City, if anybody wasn't able to catch Jackie Wynn, she was at Creative Morning. She's the former Broadway actress who was 10 years on Broadway and ended up settling here in Kansas City. She was at Creative Mornings, which does a monthly free program. There are probably about 200 people that go to that event every month. And I would highlight, it's not necessarily marketing specific, but from a networking standpoint, if you're in the creative, if you're a design, creator, storyteller, copywriter, for inspiration and to learn how to tell story and just to hear these tremendous narratives of preservation and just the way people tackle the obstacles that are thrown in front of them and how they use creative solutions to address them. Creative Mornings is a great venue I'd encourage you to check out. But if you missed Jackie, she was the speaker at this last couple weeks Creative Mornings. She's going to be the speaker at the March 3rd Social Media Club event. And she's going to focus specifically not so much on the narrative of how she went from Broadway actress to creating Vietnamese cafe in Columbus Park with her cafe, but more talking about the role social media played in growing her business. So she went from not really having any business whatsoever to now having this great brick and mortar in Columbus Park that's really it's really a beacon of light for the Asian American community here in Kansas City. And she's going to talk about the role social media played in that. So that'll be Friday, March 3rd with more details to come.
Very cool.
Yeah. Anything else, Matt, you can think of?
I don't think so. It's exciting time to be in our profession and our business and with stuff coming up locally, nationally, regionally. And of course, reconnecting is in person again in a very substantial way. So that's still looking forward to that big BCS event. But no, let's allow our listeners to hear a bit from Dr. Dani LaGree.
All right, folks, we have a wonderful time with Dr. Dani LaGree. Enjoy. Welcome to CultivatED Marketer, where we talk marketing professional development so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen.
And I'm Matt Tidwell.
And our guest today is a public relations professor at Kansas State University, my wife's alma mater, and co-founder of the Trajectory Project, an interesting series of early career navigation resources designed to assist the next generation of strategic communicators. We're going to be talking quite a bit about that today, strategic communication. Her knack for clear communication goes all the way back, and I absolutely love this, with my father being a former USDA employee, goes all the way back to her time at 4-H, where she won a regional public speaking award for her speech, If Barns Could Talk. That told the life story, or the story of the life of her great-grandparents' farm from the perspective of the barn. Welcome, Dani LaGree.
Hey, it's really great to be here with you all. Thanks for inviting me onto the podcast.
No, so glad to have you on the show. And, Matt and I've been digging into this side project you have here, the Trajectory Project. And let's just start there. Tell us how that got started.
Yeah, so that's something that I've been I call it a passion project, working on with my colleague at Kansas State, Dr. Katie Olson. Between the two of us, we have over 20 years of experience mentoring college students. And then, of course, we keep that relationship with them as they go out into the professional world. And one of the things that we noticed is that students, they learn the tools and the skills to do their job in advertising, PR, marketing, communications. But there's really less emphasis on career navigation. So lots of focus on, get that first job after graduation. But a lot of early career professionals still don't really understand the principles of career navigation, especially in those first 5 years. So I've got the first job after I graduate. Where do I go from here? What do I do to find personal and professional fulfillment and advance in my career?
Yeah, it's such a great concept, Dani. First of all, welcome from me to the show as well. It's so good to see you again, and I just think your work is, Brent and I talked about it, so it's really right down Broadway for the concept we have for our show, obviously, in terms of helping young marketers. So again, thanks for joining us. But with regard to the Trajectory Project, I'm just kind of sort of interested then when you talk about strategy, because I certainly agree, right? I know when I work with young students, the focus is on getting the job, and that's the holy grail. And when we get it, we sort of, we're not kind of understanding that there will be a path beyond that in terms of just navigating the career. So what are some of the strategies and tools that the Trajectory Project offers?
Yeah, so we have a variety of resources, and really how it exists now is as a LinkedIn page and Instagram at Trajectory Project. So we have some tools and resources there and just commentary from the both of us, myself and Katie. And we've actually done quite a bit of work in terms of research over the past 5 years, looking at the early career phase of professional employment, specifically focused on early career professionals in advertising, PR, marketing, communications, so the fields that your podcast covers. One of the first studies that we did was a qualitative study where we interviewed 31 early career women in our field, what we kind of abbreviate as the creative communications field. And we were really interested in learning how they were navigating their careers during those first 5 years of employment, focusing specifically on, what kinds of emotions were you experiencing? What were some challenges? How, if you were promoted, how are you proactive in helping to advocate for yourself and making that happen? So from that research and then the continued research that we've done, we found 4 specific strategies that early career professionals really need to be engaging in during those first 5 years to set themselves up for long-term career success. And not just career success, but also, how does my career integrate with my life? How do I find not only professional fulfillment, but personal fulfillment as well? Before I get into those 4 strategies, I also want to emphasize why we are focused on the first 5 years. And we dug into the existing research, and a lot of the vocational behavior, career psychology research tells us that the first 5 years of your professional experience can really kind of make or break your career trajectory, right? So where your career goes and what you accomplish after those first 5 years. So a lot of the, career psychology research that is out there right now is really focused on, perspectives of executive level leadership and even how middle managers move to executive levels. And we don't really have a whole lot available yet on those first 5 years. So how can early career professionals be proactive? And then how can organizations and leaders nurture and support those professionals during the first 5 years? So going back to your original question, I know maybe I got a little off topic there, but the 4 strategies that we identified to be proactive in your, what we refer to as career self-management. The first one is relationship building with your peers, organizational leaders, and those outside of your organization. So we'd really like to see early career professionals being proactive and intentional about how they are developing those professional relationships. And what's interesting too about that finding is that of the 31 women that we interviewed, only 5% of them were actively building their professional networks outside of their organization. So only 5% were members of, let's say PRSA or Ad Club or IABC, for example. And so that wasn't really happening. And they didn't really feel like they had kind of a support system in place at their current place of employment to be active in those types of activities. The second proactivity behavior that we identified were young people really need to be identifying those advocates, mentors or role models within their organizations and externally who can help answer their questions about career navigation. So we talk about mentorship a lot in professional development and how important it is for organizations to have even a mentorship, kind of a formal mentorship program in place. But we're finding that a lot of these mentorship relationships happen informally, and those are typically the most impactful. So a lot of these young women said that they had professional relationships within their organizations that, they felt like they could really trust their manager. They got great advice, but the ones that they referred to as mentors were the ones who were invested in them personally and professionally. And the third proactivity behavior is intentional confidence development. So the early career professionals who were really successfully navigating those first 5 years sought out ways to take on challenging work and projects that push them out of their comfort zones and really help to build their confidence. And we know that about confidence, that the best way to develop confidence is to get out of your comfort zone, take on something really tough and challenging. And you always know that, even if it's a positive experience or a bad experience, you always come out, still doing okay. And then they had managers who supported and advocated for them when they were taking on those challenging projects. And then the last proactivity behavior is role negotiation, right? Early career professionals do not want to feel siloed to just one task that they're doing within their organization. They want the opportunity to take on different types of work. So part of that is, as you get into your role, maybe you're 6 months or a year in, if your specific position is not giving you the opportunity to grow and develop new skill sets, you might need to have a conversation with your manager about, what kind of redefining your role might look like and why that's important for your professional career, but also your tenure and, your loyalty to your current organization.
Wow, that's great. Thanks, Dani. And I don't know about you, Brent, but as Dani was talking, I was thinking about some of these themes we've talked about on the show with prior guests, right? Young professionals wanting variety in the work that they do. And how about that first one in terms of relationship building and of course, the issues that we've seen with these membership organizations, IBC, PRSA, social media, that are having trouble recruiting at that very young professional level, to speaking directly to your findings, Dani. That's fascinating stuff, really is.
Yeah, my head was gravitating a number of different places, but particularly even the conversations we were having at IBC International about the confidence development and that strategy there. And one of the questions I would have there for you is the notion of growth through failure.
Mm-hmm.
And how that strategy might approach growth through failure, if you're able to speak to that for a moment. Because I saw a great little Instagram, or it wasn't on Instagram, a great little LinkedIn graphic somebody had posted for 2023. It said, it was kind of the Nike variety, just do it,
Yeah.
but I'm afraid. And then it said, okay, then just do it afraid. Right. So that probably fit within that strategy. But I know that's one of the obstacles for newer professionals oftentimes, or even career changers, is maybe that fear of failure. So how do you approach that within that strategy?
Yeah. So part of that just goes back also to having a supportive manager, your direct supervisor, the one, who's overseeing your work, the one you're reporting directly to, feeling comfortable and confident. And this goes back to another term that I see going around a lot in organizational psychology, is that notion of psychological safety. So even if your manager is encouraging you to take on a challenging project, they're going to have your back, even if it doesn't turn out the way that you thought it would. And they're also giving you the resources to perform that specific project that's extra challenging in a way that's going to also help you be successful. So I think that role, and this is something else I'd also like to go into a little bit more, is just the pivotal role of the middle manager in nurturing and supporting young talent, helping them to move up and get promoted throughout the organization, leads to retention and employee loyalty and engagement.
Now that I think it's extremely important to point out that role just as an advocate for all of their employees. And I think it's not even a nice shift into some of the other strategies you talked about there, where, and you touched on this a little bit, but you even heard Matt and I get confused about it earlier, is you used to emphasize this notion of finding professional identity. And I kind of equated that to maybe professional brand, but you started to speak to that maybe in the notion of variety, right? But you've shifted, it sounds like success through some metrics has now really moved to developing one's professional network. Why was some of that shift in the way you've approached things from a strategy standpoint so important?
Yeah, when we first started the Trajectory Project and really getting into this research, we were kind of laser focused on professional identity, because that's what we were seeing from a lot of our students, saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm passionate about. And they were kind of had a rigid view, maybe some blinders on about how they viewed themselves as professionals. But as we started doing our research, we found it's really not about professional identity, in terms of, a predictor of career success and satisfaction. It's really about your professional network and how you're nurturing that and growing that. And the ways in which professional identity is different from your personal brand is your personal brand evolves over time, right? Based on the different types of opportunities that you have in your career. I think that all of us can attest to that, is that it's always a work in progress. We can't see it as, this identity that never changes. So the reason for the shift to now we're focusing more on professional networking and what we call just kind of overall as professional relationships is that we're seeing that just having a profound impact on how young people navigate their careers. And it's really interesting the role of COVID, how that has really impacted, the extent to which young people feel that they're going to get value out of professional relationships and being involved in professional associations. I think my generation growing up and then, getting into their careers, and certainly your all's generation, it was kind of a given. We knew that that's something that we had to do. This generation of young people, they've been learning a lot in the online environment. They're doing a lot of things behind the screen. So their perception and their assumption is that, I don't really have to get face to face, in front of people to make those connections. And as we know, that's certainly not the case, right? You have to get out there and meet people and go out for coffee and those sort of things. So it's a missing piece from how they've grown up and how they're experiencing professional college life right now, and certainly professional life starting out. That's the missing piece, but it is really important. And I want to share a little bit of data from a recent survey that we did. And it's a smaller survey, so sample size of just 136 early career professionals, so first 5 years. We were really focusing on professional network development and if there's any relationship between that and job outcomes such as job satisfaction, employee loyalty, those types of things. And so what we found is that professional network, right, developing your professional network, mobilizing that to leverage career advancement, that predicts career adaptability. So your ability to look at your career from different perspectives and uncover new opportunities. It also predicts professional self-efficacy, so the confidence that you have in doing your job well. It predicts job satisfaction in your current role at your current organization. But the strongest relationship that it had with a job outcome was employee loyalty, which I think is really interesting. So for these young people, the more that they are developing their professional network, the more loyal they are to their organizations. So that should be a huge motivator for organizations and leadership managers thinking about giving young people these opportunities to be involved in associations and not only saying, yeah, we'll cover your membership fee, but also communicating the value of, going to lunch and learns, conferences like the Business Communicator Summit leads to overall, I just think, better career satisfaction.
Yeah, no, I completely agree and certainly see that with a lot of the young pros that I work with as well. But Dani, let me take a step back just a little bit from an age group perspective, because you and I are both in university settings. We work with a lot of the 18 to 22-year-olds, right? So not yet through with college, not yet into their career. One thing I notice with a lot of our more undergraduate aged students is that they'll kind of sign on, right? They'll major in marketing communications or strategic communications. But then I often get the feeling that they don't have a real solid understanding of what a career path even looks like in that field, or they'll be confused about it. And of course, some of them, are more proactive, maybe have internships and things like that. But it's sort of actually been a little bit shocking to me that they don't seem to have that clear view for what their career path could look like. And I've been trying to think I don't do as much undergraduate teaching, I don't think, as you do, but what kinds of things can we do to help give them that better view of what a profession like this can offer them? And so I just throw that out there. I don't know if you've noticed it as much as I have, or if you have any thoughts on maybe some things that we can do for those of us that are educators for that group to help to really give them a clear view of what I think an exciting and really stimulating career this can be.
Yeah, I see that as well. I think it's a huge challenge because there's not one formula, right, for how we navigate our careers in communication. And any of us in the field right now will, a lot of us, I think, will say, I had no idea that I'd end up doing what I'm doing, because sometimes, a lot of the jobs that we're talking about that we have today, technology changes so fast. They didn't even exist 5, 10 years ago. So I think that how it hits current college students differently is that I think that they do a lot of comparison. I talk to students all the time, getting towards December graduation, May graduation, and they are so discouraged because their roommate, who's an accounting major, has had a job lined up with a major company, since they finished their summer internship. It just doesn't work that way in our field. And that's where I think that this notion of career curiosity, having a growth mindset, being really open-minded is really, really important. We really have to emphasize to our current college students that it's okay to not know, exactly what's next. It's important to follow your curiosity. It's important to explore different types of jobs that are out there. And that goes hand in hand with developing your professional network. Because the more that you're learning from other people who are doing what you might want to be doing one day, the more you're going to hear from them about the different opportunities in the field.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also a good advertisement, right? For, hey, college students out there, avail yourselves of things like PRSSA and some of the IABC Young Education special interest groups that we have out there. I just saw another chapter was formed at Texas Tech University. And so I actually talked to some of the organizers there, and a lot of what they're trying to do is again, create that visibility to what a career looks like and things like that. But even in classes, I mean, I do think there are some things we can do. I mean, one thing, I certainly try to bring in a lot of guest speakers just because, that's an easy way for a student in a classroom to, okay, this person runs an advertising agency, and here's what that means, and here's what they do.
Right.
So on that note, I'm going to ask you each a question because you and Matt have a similar career path. I'm the odd one out in this conversation so, to some degree, right? Although Matt's tried to pull me into the world of academia. You guys have this similar career path where you started as, professionals working in consulting or agency environments and public relations, and then you switched to academia. Maybe who was that mentor for you? Who did you see in the room if it were a guest speaker? And how is that? Why did you make that change? And how's that worked for you? And Danny, I'll let you start, and then I may pick on Matt later when we do our opening, but I'm going to let Danny, I'm going to let you address that because, us talking about that, has that been part of the modeling and even the impetus for some of the work you've done?
Well, I definitely had no idea I would be where I am today teaching college students. So I don't know, I can go over my career path a little bit to explain just how I ended up here. But I'm the first person from my family to go to college. So I started off when I went to college, I was really confused about why some professors had doctor in front of their name. I just didn't understand it because I'd never been exposed to anything like that. So just again, going back to that growth mindset and keeping your options open, being curious about, this sparks my interest. Let me try a little bit more of that to see where this could go. Is so important. But after I finished my master's program, well, first of all, I did my undergrad in PR at the University of Central Missouri. They have a great program there. And I was ready to just, after I graduated, to hit the ground running, but we were still recovering from the recession. And there weren't a whole lot of opportunities available. And a great friend of mine, a mentor, she still runs the PR program there, Dr. Tricia Hansenhorn, encouraged me to stay to get my master's because they have a student-led PR agency there. And that experience came with, I had my tuition covered. So that was a priority for me. I didn't want to go into any more student debt. So I went ahead and took advantage of that opportunity, and I loved it. I loved the mentorship, continuing to advance my education and learn. And I was able to manage a group of 5 students. And I think at the time we had about 5 different clients. And I just loved building teams, nurturing client relationships, those types of things. And then after I finished there, I worked at Barkley. So when I was working there, it was actually a Crossroads PR is now Barkley. So it was Barkley PR, and then they kind of, spun off as Crossroads and then back to Barkley PR now, I think. But I kind of I was so fortunate. I worked directly with Mike Swinson. It was a phenomenal experience, helping them out a lot with new business, coordinating RFPs, doing potential client research, helping to prep for pitches. And I loved that. I never thought, as an undergrad or even a grad student that I would be involved in new business development. But I loved it. I think it just goes back to my passion for organizational communication and really helping organizations, move the business needle. But he was a great mentor for me. Also, I think I'm going to get off on another tangent here, but a lot of the research that I do too is in, the experiences of young women. And the leadership team that he had while he was there, the leadership was all women. And I remember him saying, anytime we won another account or, something really great happened in the agency and in our specific unit, he would say, this is great news. And it's all thanks to the women who run Crossroads at the time, but the women who, so that just always left such an impact on me because it was that recognition that it's not just one person who makes an organization successful. It's a lot of people working together. And then from there, I went to Bernstein Rain and did some business development there, and then really just wanted to try out client side. So I was at Silpata after that, I loved it because it was, locally run agency or organization in Overland Park. They've since been bought out by another company, but it's a jewelry company, and it wasn't a direct to consumer. They had representatives that sold their product. And I am not, so, talking again about having that growth mindset and following your curiosity, I did not intend on taking the job because I was passionate about jewelry and fashion. In fact, I could care less about fashion. But the reason that I was so intrigued by the job is because I knew I'd be working under someone who would advocate for me and help me grow as a professional. And that was, I'm going to do a lot of name dropping here, I think, because, we don't get anywhere alone. But that was Michaela Pierce, who was at Barkley for a long time and then at Zapata and now does her own consulting. But she is still a great mentor for me today. I took the job basically because I knew I'd be working under her and would be part of a team of people that I could learn a lot from. And I saw, when I was interviewing, I saw the growth potential and the different types of projects that I would take on. So that's another thing that I advise our students today. It's not just about the job title or the job description. When you're interviewing, you just have to take a look around at the types of people that you're going to be working with. Are they people who are going to challenge you and support you and encourage you to take risks and try new things? I think that's even more important than the type of organization that you're working for. And then during that time, I started adjunct teaching back at UCM, fell in love with teaching all over again, higher ed, and just thought, maybe I should make this my career. And it was, Dr. Tricia Hansenhorn who said, I think you should think about getting your PhD. And it was, those words that were uttered to me that just, another door was open. Okay, maybe I'll go for this and try it out. So I got my PhD at Mizzou, applied for the job here at K-State. And that's how it worked out for me. I know that was a long-winded response to your question, but I think it's definitely a testimony to just, it's important to have people in your corner and a support system to help you navigate those different types of decisions and what your potential could be and what your future could be.
No, I think it's amazing that you were able to, through expressing your own journey, be able to point back to a couple of the strategies and the facets of some of the tools and resources and some, like you mentioned, the support system, your peer group, and be able to point back to those things that you've learned through your own career journey, because I think that's the best way to, to teach is through a lot of those experiences. But please don't tell me that adjunct is a gateway to academia, and then I'm going to end up hot on the tail of Matt Tidwell over here. So, but I thank you for through walking, through expressing that journey and doing it in a way of, showcasing some of the strategies that you teach as well.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, Brent. You might end up, being a professor one day.
We can never tell. We'll keep working on it. No, that's great. Really appreciate your career story there, Dani, for sure. And one of the things you mentioned, I want to shift gears maybe just a little bit and talk about it, is this issue of how the industry is constituted and, frankly, gender representation, right? Because I know one of the things I see I see two ends of the spectrum. I see too few women at the very, very top levels of our business. And also, this may just be observational, just the way it is, but when I teach my courses in strategic communications and young professionals in their first 2 or 3 years of the business, my classes are 80%, easily 80% female. So I'm seeing heavy representation of females early in career, and sometimes mid-career. But then, when we think about it, probably not nearly the representation we should have of females at the very top of the industry, running the very top agencies, either locally, regionally, nationally. And so I know you've looked mostly at women in the business. So where are we today in terms of representation of the genders within the business? And, how can we get more young men interested in the business at the very beginning, but then also work to help represent females more heavily at the top of the field?
Yeah, I have done a lot of work in that area, and you're absolutely right. I mean, and the data speaks for itself that we see a lot of women early on in the field in my classrooms. Yeah, easily 80% female. But then as we look at organizations at the corporate or the corporate executive level, in terms of, even in agency, leadership is still dominated. The C-suite is still dominated by men. And I think that there's a couple of reasons for that. I think it is natural for women, once they kind of get to that level, they have to, unfortunately, sometimes have to make a decision of, do I want to continue taking on more responsibility, or do I want, to make sure that I can be home every day at 5 to be with my kids. So I think some of that is just, it tends to occur naturally, but that's why we were so interested in this early career phase, is because it's those first 5 years of full-time employment that can help a young woman understand and visualize a path to leadership. And so investing in those first 5 years, and it might be even, from that entry level, then promotion to middle level manager. And then from there, you have certainly an upward moving trajectory. I think that we have made a lot of headway in the past couple of years, especially, I hate to say post-COVID, I guess we are kind of out of it now. But organizations, I think, are now starting to realize that there's so much value in letting employees work where they want and when they want. And with that flexibility, I think opens up even more doors for women to rise up in the ranks. So I'm very optimistic for, what leadership in the C-suite can look like, 5, even 10 years from now. But, sometimes when we get on this topic of gender representation and leadership, sometimes I see, or I hear the narrative kind of turning into kind of like this anti-man narrative. And I don't support that, because I think that we need both men and women in leadership, because we both bring different skill sets and strengths and perspectives to the table. And in terms of, Matt, what you said about young men, we can't forget the young men either, and supporting them early on in their careers, because now more than ever, I think that young men really need those professional mentors and role models in their lives to show them the way forward.
Yeah, I appreciate what you mentioned about perspective. A lot of the diversity discussion that's happening, out the emphasis around DEI, A, B, belonging, and a lot of that belonging includes diversity of thought right?
Yeah.
So that's an important component of a lot of the diversity work that's being done out there.
Yeah. And you want it to be authentic. It's not just about numbers or making sure, at the leadership level, we have to make sure it's 50% men, 50% women. I think everyone would agree that people should be promoted based on their skills and abilities and track records, not because of gender. In fact, that's what women have been saying for a long time, right?
Yeah. Well, and you touched on that earlier, skills and abilities, and Matt and I've had these conversations along the way with folks like Mike Swenson around,
Hmm.
some of those are hard skills, right? Your ability to execute a great pitch, right? If you're a public relations
Yeah.
professional, and some of those, as you touched on, are middle management skills. Are you
Yes.
a great coach? Are you
Yeah.
a great advocate? Are you a person that can remove obstacles and create a great culture of success, which are completely different set of skills than being able to pitch,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, a few other things that came top of mind for me as I was hearing you, talk about, pitching and more soft skills. First of all, this younger generation, I know a lot of them, they're super comfortable, right, doing remote work, and being behind their screens. And I would love to see organizations really help to communicate the value of being in the office for these young workers. And not that, you have to be in there from 8 to 5, 5 days a week, but really helping them understand, this is going to help set you up for success. Because what we have learned through a lot of our data and our interviews with the young women is that when they had a mentor or a role model, whether that mentor is male or female, they were constantly observing them, watching them in meetings, picking up on how they presented themselves, how they pitched ideas, how they confidently communicated their perspective. And they looked to those people as role models and really appreciated them for how they were able to show, this is how you can earn influence in your organization. And so much of that comes from observation and being in the office and being in in-person meetings. So that's one part of it. And the other part is that I really want executive leaders to understand how pivotal that middle manager is, how influential the middle manager is in helping to support and retain young workers, and not just retain them. Like, I know that everyone's so interested in retention because you know, there's a talent war going on right now, as we all know about. But really being focused on not only retaining them, but it's the middle managers that show these young workers, what does my path to leadership look like at my current place of employment? If they know that path and they understand what's required to get those promotions and move up and earn that recognition and the pay raise and the new title that comes with it, a lot of those young workers are going to stay. And so it's really important that those middle managers have the support and the resources that they need. And ideally, in the perfect world, right, the time to invest in actually, managing and mentoring and developing these younger workers.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you, the middle management thing really rings true to me. I worked for a global pharmaceutical company about 20 years ago where we would routinely survey employees on the effectiveness of the communications they were getting. And one of the ways we would cut that was by level, right? So effectiveness of frontline supervisors, middle management, senior executives. The group that always lagged behind, always, with every single survey, was middle managers, right? Frontline supervisors, pretty decent job, but kind of new in the job and maybe working with a smaller group and being engaged. Senior executives, by necessity, the good ones, understood they had to be good communicators. Middle managers, we had to send them all back to training school because it just was this black hole in the middle of the organization. So it's a great point, Danny. I'm so glad to hear you focus on that area because I think it really rings true. Hey, I know you've been generous with your time. Though I have to ask you, one of the things that's so cool about you is you really do span such a broad area in terms of your research. But I know you received kind of a really nice honor in 2021, some of your research into what young workers, you touched on this a bit with workplace, but specifically what young workers in the workplace want in terms of the workplace. And it was featured in Fast Company, certainly one of my favorite reads and kind of a must for marketers. Can you tell us, just because we want to put that in the show notes, I went back and read the article. It's fascinating. Tell us a little about that research and what you found.
Yeah, we did some research on what we've called respectful leadership communication. So kind of debunking, the notion of we have to give employees a lot of perks, and really looking at, what does leadership communication look like in terms of increasing employee loyalty and retention. And I really do have to give another shout out to my research partner for this one, and that's Margaret Duffy at Mizzou, the Novak Leadership Institute there. We worked together with a team of other people on this study. And so, yeah, we surveyed, it was over 1,000 young workers aged 21 to 31. And we were really interested in this notion of workplace respect, because a lot of the existing literature talks about how, workers really do, at the end of the day, they just want to be respected. More so, the biggest motivator of feeling fulfilled in your career is not just about salary or benefits or getting free gym memberships from your employer. It's really about, do I feel respected on a day-to-day basis? And what we found is that respect, so we measured two different types of respect. One was just respectful engagement, so just the overall kind of culture of respect that you experience in your workplace. But the other one was earned respect. So the recognition that you get from your supervisor or your boss, and how that, relates to job satisfaction, loyalty, and engagement. And that recognition, the specific recognition from your supervisor or boss, was the strongest predictor of job satisfaction, employee loyalty, and engagement. So, going back to our previous discussion on middle management and just the power of, a simple phrase that can be, communicated to these younger workers, it's such a long way. It goes such a long way. And it makes a really big impact. And something else that I want to mention about this is that I've heard a lot of young people, young workers, and this comes through in a lot of our research, is that they're like, you know what, I don't need another company branded water bottle when I meet my goals, or I don't need to be, honored at, our company monthly happy hour or whatever. They want to receive recognition from decision makers and leaders in their organization. So it would mean a lot to a young person if the middle manager let someone at the C-suite level or an executive leadership know, hey, so-and-so, they really knocked it out of the park on this specific project. Can you just, stop by their office, or, maybe just set up a quick Zoom call with them to let them know, that they're making an impact to the bottom line of this organization. And I think that kind of it's very simple, but oftentimes goes unnoticed. But that direct communication from someone in a very influential level to that entry level early career employee is really valuable. It helps them feel valued, and it helps them understand that the work that they are doing really does matter. So we hear a lot from young people today, Matt. I know that you've heard this probably from your students. Oh, I just want to make a difference. I want to do meaningful work. And sometimes that meaningful work isn't always, it's not inherent to these young workers, especially since a lot of them are doing, the tactical work instead of the strategy part. But they need to hear that value from their middle managers as well as executive leadership of, the day-to-day tasks that you're doing here are making an impact. And that goes so much further in terms of loyalty, retention, engagement than, branded swag.
Well, and I worry we still have a ways to go on that. I was actually kind of sitting as a fly on the wall in a conversation with some business leaders just about a year ago, as sort of everything was opening back up, maybe a year and a half. And one of the comments that was made was, well, gosh, we've got these 600 employees, the phrase that was used, how are we going to lure them back, right? Which I thought was interesting. And so then the conversation, well, we need more pool tables. We need more, beer fridges. You can guess what industry I'm talking about here. But anyway, I just remember thinking, how about treating your people the right way? I realize it's common sense, but maybe now that's more important than ever if you truly want to, quote, lure them back. So, that definitely rings true for sure.
Well, Dani, at the risk of making my undergrad journalism student, so I have one at the University of Kansas, making him cringe, I know that Matt and I have mad respect for you and the insights that you've shared with us today. We've talked about, the first 5 years and the importance of that and some of the strategies. What else maybe on the connected series of actions would you like to mention that we may have missed in some of the conversation that we've had today?
I would just say, the emphasis on organizations supporting those younger employees, spending some of their time in professional associations and not just, covering membership fees, dues, whatever that might be, paying for a lunch and learn, but helping them understand that we want you to do this because it's going to help cultivate your professional network. It's going to give you a sense of career satisfaction. We are interested not only in, what you're doing day to day here in your job, but we are interested in developing you as, a well-rounded professional. And part of that is being involved in professional associations, especially early on in your career.
And you spoke to the benefit of that earlier, being the company gets a return on investment there with loyalty, right? Which is phenomenal. So you've provided so many great insights. Where can people find more about the Trajectory Project?
Yeah, it's LinkedIn. We have it set up as a company page, so you can just search the Trajectory Project and it should come up. And then I have a website that's still a work in progress, DaniLaGree.com, that I plan on producing some white papers about some of this research so that people don't have to read through a 20-page journal article about it.
Very, very modest. I was on the website and it looks lovely with lots of great insights in the blog and the like. Well, Dani, thanks for joining Matt and I today. We've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. It's been so much fun to be a part of this. And I just thank you for the work that you're doing with the podcast, and the focus on professional development is a huge advantage for all of your listeners.
Appreciate it. If you found value in today's episode, check us out on our website, CultivatedMarketer.com. You'll also be able to subscribe to us, rate us, and leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Remember, a garden of opportunity grows with Cultivated Marketer.